Are you curious about bodies, pleasure, and possibilities? And what about curious about what others are up to on the planet when it comes to pleasure, sex, and play? Have you considered what pleasure can do for your life, your body, and your bank account? Do you know something magical, delightful, and out of this world orgasmic is not only possible for you, but totally available to you? If you're ready to be the magical, sexual, sexy beast you know you can be, and you just need the tools to get there, you're in the right place. Now, here is the host of The Pleasure Zone, sex, relationship, and intimacy coach and holistic health practitioner, Milica Jelenic.
Welcome, my sweet pleasure seekers. Tonight, we are having a conversation that I think a lot of people just kind of ignore. And so we're going to have that conversation tonight. The conversation is about how intimacy is a really big component of having a balanced life. I know I hear people talking about balancing, doing different things to balance your lifestyle. What can you do to, whether you're balancing your life through, adding more exercise or adding different things. Exercise is great too. And I like to throw a few things into the exercise mix, like, I don't know, sex, intimacy, physical intimacy. And then also other things that can bring about a balanced life are things that bring you joy and pleasure and playfulness. And when you think about an overall balanced life, though, a lot of times I have not heard people throw in that big S word, that big sex word, that somehow that is pushed aside. It doesn't seem to be all that important. Why is that? Why do we have, that list of make sure you're eating well, make sure that you're getting enough sleep, make sure that you're doing enough movement, exercise type stuff, but nowhere do we say make sure you're having enough sex or human connection or intimacy. Guys, it's important. Also, all of that, part of a balanced life also includes balance in finances as well, balance with your work and your play, like all of that, right? So you often do hear people go, oh, it's my work-life balance, but it's not my work-sex life balance or my work-life and sex life balance. So I just don't know. Have you guys heard people talk about sex being an absolutely integral part to a balanced life? Intimacy itself is integral to a balanced life. So who am I and who cares? Well, my name is Milica Jelenic. I have been the host of The Pleasure Zone for almost 11 years now. It'll be 11 years in 2 weeks from now. So, woo. So when I'm talking about why am I talking about this stuff? I'm talking about this stuff because I have a full-on interest in all things to do with human sexuality, with intimacy, with bodies, with all that stuff. And I'm a holistic health practitioner. And in my practice, I've had a lot of people come to me talking about, well, I eat right and I do this and I do that. And then if I ask questions about their relationship, usually that is where the issues lay. And the issues lay there, and we often think that that has no impact on our health. I have to tell you that yes, indeed, it does. If it doesn't mean that you have to have sex in order to be healthy. What it means is in order to be healthy, you need to have connections to other people, other living human beings. So men, women, any kind of gender that you would like to name, whether you're non-binary, it doesn't really matter. You need connections to others. That is part of what calms down our nervous system. It's part of what helps us to feel connected to society, feel safe. Some people say that they'd rather be a hermit and live in, just by themselves in the middle of the bush. Well, that might be true, but they're also going to be on high alert all the time. They're going to be living in a situation where they have to be always on high alert to know if there's any dangers around. The thing about community and connecting with other people is that as you learn to trust, and as you learn to trust you, to trust who you can develop community where you actually can rely on others to know that either you're safe or looked after. And that is part of what brings your nervous system to calm, so that your uh, your parasympathetic nervous system can calm down and not be in fight or flight, where your sympathetic nervous system kicks in and is ready to, try and survive. So how does intimacy play into that? I'm talking about community. How does intimacy play into community? Well, in order to create community, we have to be able to be close to people. And that closeness is how we can refer to intimacy. It doesn't mean sex. Sex and intimacy are not the same thing. So when I talk about being a sex and intimacy coach, those words are not interchangeable necessarily, although I hear a lot of people use them interchangeably, where, especially when I talk with older clients, they often refer to the intimacy with their partner. And I'm like, are you talking about sex, or are you talking about the times where you share love? You might be hugging, and it might not be a sexual thing. It just might be the same kind of hug you might give like your children, right? To comfort them. So those comfort hugs are great too. And they are also important in creating that sense of calm. So why do we need to be able to calm ourselves in order to have greater intimacy? Connection, and that deep intimacy and connection occur when your body is calm. If you're in fight or flight, or if you're in freeze, or if you're in fawn. So if you're in fight or flight, you're going to be running away from people. You're going to be in a mode where you don't trust, because everything is going to have you on high alert. If you're in freeze, then you're not even really responding. You might be disconnected. You might even be disassociating. And when you go to fawn, you're just people pleasing. It's not really about connecting. It's about trying to please others. So that is not necessarily connection. So how do we find a way to connect? Well, first we bring our bodies to calm. One of the greatest ways to do that is to get ourselves grounded. So we'll talk about some of those grounding things, having better sleep, all that kind of stuff. One of the things that we need to do is be able to emotionally regulate ourselves in order to get ourselves to calm as well. I was actually talking to a lady today who is saying that her child has, her child was diagnosed and with something that would be considered a behavioral issue, but it's, I always find it interesting. I think that there's a lot of diagnosis that is, maybe like there's a lot of diagnosis that isn't accurate, maybe, or it's given too early. It's maybe through a quick observation of a behavior, but it's not something that you would see in the person long term, or you might not realize what else is affecting them. So emotional regulation is something that, if you have behavioral issues, is really hard to navigate. So, if you are medicated for things like ADHD, it might help you to regulate that. But sometimes there are things that are affecting your emotional regulation, could be environmental things, whether it's sounds or like whether it's noises or smells, or environmentally, even things like toxic molds or PEMF, like EMFs, actually the electromagnetic fields that are at a toxic level for bodies, different toxins and chemicals. There are so many things that actually affect us and can affect our emotional ability to emotionally regulate, that often isn't talked about. Often we just talk about it as stimuli or other people who are affecting you, to say, that person triggered you and then you're responding, and not able to emotionally regulate. So what we need to do is learn how to soothe things, soothe your nervous system, reduce anxiety, and be able to have the tools to create more resilience. So the number one thing for me when it comes down to intimacy is being present. And another way to say being present is to notice your now. I guess that's a good way to put it, right? Notice your now. Notice where you're at. So, instead of jumping to 45 years in the future, um, bring it back to now. And bring it back to now is, what do you require in this moment? If you're like kind of like losing your tits over something, then you got to stop or have somebody assist you and like facilitate you and just like stop, breathe. What do you require right now? And a lot of times when you really stop and feel it, sometimes all you really require right then is maybe quiet, maybe you need a hug, maybe, and this is where the ability to communicate what you require is really helpful. Emotional regulation can be a lot easier when you actually have the language for the emotions you're feeling. And there are so many amazing charts out there that have like a vast number of emotions. So instead of just saying, I'm angry, within that umbrella of anger, there might be things like frustration, or actually the undercurrent might be fear that's creating the anger. And so then you can kind of look at it, the nuances of the emotions. And I think every family should have a chart that's got one of these. I know I have somewhere in like a file hidden deep within my computer, but if you go and look, I'm sure you'll find some too, to be able to get the language that's going to help you to say it and say how you feel. Right. So intimacy also comes through conversation and being able to say how you feel, say what your needs are, be able to do different things in terms of breath work, even, or regulating your nervous system through movement, finding different ways to reduce anxiety. So, my favorite ways to reduce anxiety are breath work. There's this intermittent kind of breathing where you breathe in, you hold, and you breathe out. That one's fantastic for anxiety. My other favorite one for anxiety is to check if it's even mine or if it's even real. One of the works of Byron Katie with her 4 questions. Is it true? How do you know for certain that it's true? Without that thought, who would you be? How would you feel? And then you turn it around. Fantastic for anxiety, because a lot of times the things we think are real in that moment are not even happening. They're presumptions about the future or things we experienced in the past, but they're not occurring right then. So the more we have these tools, we can create resilience, we can create strength in ourselves and our character and our ability to face these things, and also have the tools so that we can navigate them if they ever come up again. So in order to have more of a sense of intimacy, we need to know ourselves. And in order to know ourselves, we need to know what our feelings are. What are some words for them? And the reason I ask you to look it up is because if you're listening to this and maybe your primary language is not English, there should be, and maybe there aren't, but there should be charts in different languages. And if there aren't, I think that would be a great thing for somebody to go out and create. That's not my wheelhouse, but if you're great at translating, find some of those wheels and translate them, because we certainly could use more capacity and skills and tools to be able to navigate how we feel, instead of just having some basic, I'm mad, I'm sad, I'm happy. Um, those are pretty basic, but then when you really look at nuances, it can be incredibly helpful, and also being incredibly helpful to describe it, but then also those descriptions can also help in letting that energy out, so you're not holding on to it, trying to understand it or understand it. And oftentimes bringing that into your body will make your nervous system kind of go a little bit wacko, right? So fight or flight or freeze or fawn, it'll go into the response of stress. So when you internalize, instead of trying to navigate it by moving it out of your body physically or discuss it through language that's effective, if you internalize it, it's just going to aggravate your body and your system. And then you don't really know you because you haven't taken the time to get to know you. And then that intimacy with yourself isn't really there. So, in order to have a fulfilling life, we need intimacy, because part of that is knowing who we are, knowing our feelings. And intimacy is absolutely integral to balance. Intimacy, in this case, is a little different than when we talk about sex, right? So, and I'm all for the sex too. So I want to include that in there because I think sex is often overlooked as one of the things for balance, like I mentioned earlier. And so yeah, we're going to look at all of that. So you're listening to the Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show, with sex, relationship, and intimacy coach, Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for the Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email becomeahost@inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is the Pleasure Zone with sex, relationship, and intimacy coach, Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@MilicaJelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. Just before we went on break, I was talking about discussing feelings and, head off and find those charts. I know there's tons of them on break. I just decided to go look it up. There's things called the feelings wheel. There's behavioral feelings wheels as well. There's a lot of different charts that can help you navigate what your feelings are. And I think having a visual tool, especially if you're working with learning these words, and like if you haven't had a lot of experience discussing your feelings, having these charts, even though they're usually dedicated to therapy with children, can be helpful even for adults. So don't be shy if the chart is a chart that normally would be for kids. There's a wheel that I just found too that's called the emotions wheel that has 128 emotions for naming feelings. And you can find that, you can buy that, you can play with it, you can make your own if you want. And, sometimes just naming those feelings can really help you to feel more confident in who you are, knowing like, you know what, I'm actually not a mean person. I'm a frustrated person. It's a very different energy, but a lot of people might think you're mean, even though you're just frustrated. So I say that because I've had quite a day of working with a lot of people, but one of the conversations I had this morning was with a family member who he was very frustrated, and I know I understand that he's frustrated. There's a language barrier, there's a memory barrier, there's a lot of things going on, and so his frustration can often come out as being unkind or mean. And as long as I can see it for what it is, I'm like, oh, actually, I see it as frustration, then I can kind of pull back and be able to be more of a reasonable human being and hear what's going on. And it's also to not have the expectation that the other person, they could be a lot older and they never sat down and looked at these charts of emotions or understood more than the, four basic maybe emotions that people have. Because whenever I do discuss it, I'm like, are these words that make sense to you? Is this like frustration? Are you scared? And then it's like, oh yes, that, right? But before that, those words are not really part of the vocabulary. So it's hard for people to know what they are. I'm not really a big fan on prompting people to kind of help them identify those words. I'd rather give them a chart. But when somebody doesn't have access to those kinds of tools or the charts, then sometimes asking the question, like, does it feel more like it matches, and then give them like 10 different things, that can be helpful. Again, you're not really there to navigate or facilitate that, but for yourself, it can be helpful too. If there's like 10 things on a chart that look like they could match what you're going through, then just kind of feel it out, and it can be all 10 at the same time as well. So we need to be able to see how we feel so we can emotionally regulate in order to have conversations with our partner. So also, and with ourselves too, even as self-reflection and journaling and being able to, write these things out can be incredibly helpful and help you be able to see into you more. And that will bring more balance into your life. So how does it bring more balance in? The more you, then say if you're frustrated, for example, oh, I was working all day and I'm frustrated. Well, you might just say, I'm working all day and I'm tired and I'm mad. Well, that, you might say that, but then what it is it might be frustrated that you haven't taken any time for yourself. And you're like, oh, okay, I'm actually frustrated because I haven't taken any time for myself. And what I really would like to do is go honor me and do A, B, C, and D. So today, before the show, actually before supper, we have a pool, and I haven't had a lot of time to get in the pool, but in the last few days, I have made the choice to commit to that. And I'm like, I'm going in. It doesn't matter that I'm like, we don't have a pool where we can swim laps. I'm going in the pool because the pool makes me happy. Water makes me happy. And it's literally like the top place where my body likes to move and groove and exercise. So in order to know that about me, had to actually take a minute and stop and check. I could have just sat inside the house, got frustrated and angry, and blamed everybody else for me not having time to do that, which is absolutely not true. That's on me. Or I could take responsibility, know my feelings, identify them, and then go do something about it. So part of responsibility is being able to respond to what your needs are. And that's responsibility, your ability to respond to what your needs are. And then when you do that, and you can also tell others what your needs are, you can become closer. And that essentially is how you create more balance in your life, right? So you know what your needs are. That knowing what your needs are and then taking action to fulfill those needs is part of having balance in your life. Right? So if you don't know what your needs are and you just walk around frustrated all the time and you're upset with people, then you're not going to feel balanced. You're going to feel overworked, overburdened, burnout, right? Because you haven't been able to verbally say or communicate, whether it's verbal or written, you haven't been able to communicate what your needs are because you don't know what they are, because you haven't taken the time to sit and evaluate, what am I really feeling? What am I really feeling here? And what can I do about it? And when we start to take those actions, your life can improve. It absolutely can get better. Some of those things that we can do, knowing the emotion, naming the emotion is great. And then, having the actual activity of having physical intimacy, sex, for example. What are those? There's benefits for that are, I think they're pretty self-evident, but they might not be. So let's talk about those. So when it comes to sex, our bodies, when your body gets excited and it has even if it's like reaching orgasm or achieves orgasm, your body releases oxytocin. It actually releases a lot of the happy hormones. So dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins are all part of the act of physical, especially consensual, physical intimacy, sex, as most people know it, that helps to release oxytocin, which reduces stress. It reduces stress hormones, and it also lowers blood pressure. So if you already have low blood pressure, maybe you've just been masturbating a lot. I don't know. I generally have low blood pressure, but I'm not like a 25 times a day kind of masturbator, guys. They're just saying. I don't think I've ever done that. I don't think I've ever masturbated 25 times in a day. I just don't know where people get the time for it. I'm not like a 20-second masturbator, but maybe if I was, I could. That's a whole other side note, kids. So why do we need this for physical health and for self-intimacy? Why is this important to balance? Well, for one thing, if we don't have those happy hormones going on, you could be doing all the things you want in the world. You could be eating all the right food. You could be, trying to get that balance between work and life. But if you're not having those happy hormones release, you're going to be doing all of this and feeling like you're not getting results and feeling kind of miserable. So get those happy hormones released, because that is where things start to change up in your biochemistry. And that's when you start to realize the benefits of what you're doing. So I'm a big fan of, like, if you've just had, say, for example, like a big challenge at work, and whether you're working for somebody or you're working as an entrepreneur, if you've just overcome a big challenge, and maybe in your relationship, you have an agreement with your partner that every time we overcome a challenge, one of us gets oral sex, or we get to pick the pleasure of our choice, then achieving those targets can be super fun and super sexy. So you can utilize, uh, physical intimacy. You can utilize your sex life in order to help you achieve your targets. You can also use it to create the balance as well for those happy hormones. I know it sounds like it's kind of like that, you have like a big list of things to do, but it actually can be so integrated into your life that you don't even realize it at some point, where it's just like, hey, you know what, just had like this, I just achieved like this super big, I don't know, say like a contract. And then you know that within your relationship, that anytime somebody gets a really big contract, like these fun things that you normally don't do get to happen. Maybe you're going to have a full kink night of exploration or something. Have fun with it. Like, make it something that is great to look forward to, that you actually follow through with, that everybody's consented to, that you've communicated with about in advance. It also, the anticipation can really help get motivation going too. So if you're feeling like zero motivation, if you're feeling like nothing is really like kicking you in the pants to get moving, so you're like, well, why bother having sex? What's the point? Or why bother going to work? What's the point? Just doing stuff, and it's just like the grind. Have targets that you can use for both, right? So it's like you achieve a certain target at work or in your work, and then you get to have sex, or you get to have, you can flip it around if you want to. I just like to have the targets achieved at work and then get the sex as like a reward, because sex can be a reward. It can be used playfully as a reward. It shouldn't be used really as a sort of a what's the other word? The opposite of a reward, which is like when you're being punished. Like, sex should not be a punishment. Like, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to have sex with you, that would be completely non-consensual. So using it in a playful way, like, hey, yay, I just achieved this target. I just, got a $10,000 commission, yay. And it's part of a celebration, and then it helps the oxytocin go on. What it also does is starts to set into motion in your body the desire to create more of those scenarios that are going to, encourage you to get, say that other $10,000 commission. And then it's like, oh, so last time I got the $10,000 commission, I got to have my kinky play day. Well, that's fun. I'm going to try that again. So if you have great communication with your partner and your partner understands and knows where you're coming from and vice versa, you guys have this communication about this in a really clear way, you can absolutely utilize sex in a way that will help both of you achieve targets. And a lot of times, the people who need this balance in life are either feeling totally unmotivated because they don't really enjoy their life, or they are so overburdened with things like work and other responsibilities that sex has been put on the back burner as something that doesn't matter. But I'm telling you guys, it's important, and it can be utilized as a tool, can be utilized as a tool for your health to help these happy hormones kick in to help regulate your nervous system. It can be used for so many things, and it's so important. So touch in itself can help with oxytocin, right? Like that 20-second hug. I like to go for more, can help support your nervous system. It can help you regulate your nervous system. So, having that as something that is part of your everyday can help you start your day and end your day with those bookends of pleasure. Because people often talk about, how do you bookend your day? Well, some people like read books. Fantastic. Knowledge is important. Sex is important. It needs to be part of your day. Intimacy is important. So physical intimacy, whether you are just hugging your partner for that 20 seconds, if you can even just carve out 3 to 5 minutes a day of being in contact with your partner in a way that involves touch, it can change so much for your biochemistry, help your whole nervous system calm down, help your body heal, help you feel connected. So it is incredibly important to balance in your life. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the different tips and tools for how and why intimacy is integral to balance in your life. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show, with sex, relationship, and intimacy coach, Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for the Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is the Pleasure Zone with sex, relationship, and intimacy coach, Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@MilicaJelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome, my sweet pleasure seekers. Tonight, we are talking all about how intimacy is integral to balance in your life. And we're not just talking about intimacy as a lot of people consider intimacy to be the physical act of sex. We're talking about intimacy as in, how do we get to know ourselves more? So the intimacy of even knowing your feelings, knowing who you are in relation to others as well. Because a lot of times what can happen is people will start to get to know who they are. And then in that journey, you'll start to seek out people who are similar to you. And then for a while, what I've noticed personally happen, and I've noticed it in a lot of other people, is that it's like, you're like, oh, I found my people. But then you find your people, but then you forget that there's still growth and that you might be growing out and beyond that. So it's not that we're ever finished growing. It's not that we're ever finished knowing ourselves. Intimacy is a growing, ongoing process for our lives. So when you have knowledge of that and you're like, you know what? I choose to be intimate with me until the day I leave this body. You will find that you become curious about yourself. You become curious about a lot of things. Like you'll probably want to try out a lot of things that you never tried before, whether it's foods or experiences or all kinds of stuff, even things like being willing to be vulnerable enough to and strong enough to be able to name those feelings that we talked about in the first and second segment of this show. I think that for me is actually a really key thing because so many times people come to me and they don't have the language to explain what they are feeling. So having these charts can be very, very helpful. So get one of those emotion charts with like the 125 or 128 emotions and play around and see how you feel with any of the energies in them because they will feel very different. And that'll help you identify what's going on. Where does it come from? What, is this like a primary feeling that you have in your life? And what can you do if you don't like it? What can you do to change it? So, talking about physical intimacy in the last segment, just before we went to break, talking about like doing the 20 to 30-second hug, spending maybe even 5 minutes of touch with your partner so you can kick in that oxytocin, being one of those four happy hormones. You got your dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. They spell out dose, by the way. And if you have your happy hormones, then your body will start to be able to self-regulate. Anxiety will lessen, your heart will regulate, your body will start to be able to uh, even metabolize food better. It's so important to be able to have your body be able to find a place of calm and to know yourself through being able to use communication. So knowing how to communicate your feelings, connection, so connecting with others. And of course, all of this requires consent, but curiosity too can really lead us to a lot of new experiences and ideas and help with that knowing of yourself. So those 4 C's that I talk about all the time, often talk about 3, but I'm throwing in number 4 today with connection. So communication, consent, um, and we got, communication, consent, connection, and curiosity. Those are super important to me when it comes to relationship and being able to have relationship with myself and then be able to bring that to others. Super important for me in having balance in my life. So communication can work in a few different ways with balance in my life. Part of it is communicating with myself and my body communicating with me. So my body communicates all the time. We have signals going on in our bodies constantly. There's communication. We just don't often stop and think about what is our body saying to us. Neurologically, things are always happening. Biochemically, things are happening. So if we just take a minute to stop and go, oh, wait a second, body, do you need like a little movement right now? Like, so while I'm doing the show, I'm sitting, but my body would prefer to move. So, when I get off, when we're finished here, I'm going to get up, I'm going to stretch, I'm going to move, might wiggle my butt a little bit, but I prefer movement. Not everybody does. My body is happier when I have movement happening. So I know that, and it's not always the case. Sometimes my body requires stillness. But what I do know how to do is how to ask my body what it requires. And then I follow that. And I know that sounds weird and wacky and wonderful. Like, how do you even ask? You literally ask, hey, body, is there something that you require right now? And then you sit and you pause and like pause for like 37 seconds and just perceive what's going on. And your body might go, you know what? I require water. And you might just all of a sudden feel like that parched, like right now, I require water. My body was needing it. So you might get those hits of information. And then when you follow through, your body will be ever so grateful for you. And also you'll begin to trust your body more. Your body will trust you more so that, it doesn't feel like it's being abandoned by you, or that you're sabotaging it somehow into having physical issues and health issues and whatever, because that can happen to just body is a kind of form of self-sabotage. And then what you do, so your body's telling you some of these things, and you follow through, and that can be a game changer. You create a lot of balance in your body too, and in your life. Because if you are listening to what your body is asking of you, it might be like, hey, you know what? I really require going for a walk right now. And you follow through. Well, there's you creating balance, right? You're getting your movement, you're getting your exercise. Your body might be like, you know what I really require right now is a celery stick. Awesome. So you give your body that celery stick, and then it feels refreshed, or whatever, it gets that salt kick from celery. There's whatever it happens to be, when you follow through, your body will start to trust you more. I know it sounds weird, but it's a relationship. It really is. And you will start to trust your body more. That intimacy will become clear to you. That relationship between you and your body will become incredibly clear. And then you'll know not only how you feel, you'll have the language, because we talked about developing the language for that. You'll know how to ask for things, as we've talked about in a few of the past episodes too, learning how to have that communication, the may I, the consent, all the things around consent. And as we've talked about in the last few episodes, the wheel of consent. So it is, as you start to know what your body really requires and having those conversations with your body, it is one of the first primary ways to become intimate with yourself. And I'm not even talking about masturbation. I'm talking about knowing you. There's that saying, people are like, into me, see. There's that. And then there's also that seeing yourself, but also just the intimacy with you. It's more about your own intimacy. So into me, you see is one intimacy form, but into myself, I see is another intimacy form. So definitely check in with your body on a regular basis, like daily, maybe even hourly at first. Like, what does it require? It will tell you, follow through on that. If you really are not sure how to pull that off and you want some tips and tools more on that, like you want to connect, you can always book some time with me through milica.jelenic.com. There's a booking link there. You can book some time and we can go through that. I have many shows on that, so many shows from the past on how to connect with your body. So definitely do that. Some other intimacy that you can have with your partner that's beyond sex, because a lot of times the sex is just the one way we see it. We have emotional intimacy, which we talked about in the first segment, but also intellectual intimacy is a really big one too. Getting to know sharing your thoughts and ideas, even about creating the future, and anything around your thoughts and ideas, whether it's philosophical, whether it's political. If you can have these conversations with your partner, unless of course you've agreed to have certain things off the that you never talk about. Like, I have an aunt and uncle who agreed when they first met that they will never talk religion or politics, because those were things that they knew they would never agree on. And if you know that, then don't talk it. But if you don't know that yet, then being able to talk and have intellectual conversations, for me as a sapiosexual, somebody who gets turned on by people's intellect, intellectual intimacy is so hot. Also, when somebody can speak multiple languages, even if I can't understand them, so sexy. That kind of intimacy can be a really that kind of intimacy to me is like the most erotic. I'm just going to keep all my horny thoughts to myself on that as my body is like getting ideas. But it can be so stimulating. So as my grandfather once referred to, he was like in university, going to school to be a doctor, and he had had a friendship with somebody that he referred to as intellectual. He made it sound so sexual, like intellectually stimulating, and some other words. And I was like, oh, Grandpa, you had a crush on that woman, didn't you? My grandmother had passed away at that point. He still didn't admit that he'd had a crush on her, but I could tell by his language that there was a little something, something going on there. And why not? He was away at school. My grandparents were together for like 70 years before she died, or something crazy like that, super long. Anyhow, that was like a whole offhanded story, from a whole other direction. But that kind of level of intimacy, of being able to have those conversations with people and get turned on by intellectual intimacy, is so real. Also, spiritual intimacy is so real. So many people have really healthy relationships because their primary focus is on their spiritual life, and their spiritual life is the center of their relationship. And because of that, everything else in their life can circumnavigate around that. And that is what brings in the balance as well. And that spiritual intimacy, being able to, pray with somebody, do yoga with them, meditate with them, whatever your spiritual practices are, all of that can be so, so deeply connecting for people. And when you do have similar beliefs, if that is the core foundation of your relationship, then one of the practices you want to include in your life is your spiritual practices. What I've seen happen before is that people might start with a relationship where they're dabbling in kind of like their spiritual beliefs and figuring it out, and then somehow it just veers off and gets pushed aside. But if your spiritual life is important to you, and it's important to your partner, and you share a similar belief, then it's important that you guys share that together as well. We're going to head to our last commercial break. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network. I'm going to have some water and we'll be right back from this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show, with sex, relationship, and intimacy coach, Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. This is The Pleasure Zone with sex, relationship, and intimacy coach, Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. Tonight we've been talking all about the importance for creating balance in your life. And it's so integral. It's such an integral piece of balance that I think it often gets overlooked, often gets put on the back burner. I often hear people say things like, well, I'm too old, doesn't matter. It matters. And I think if we're looking at physical intimacy, whether it's people, putting that in the same category as sex, or whether it's cuddles or touch, all of that stuff, physical intimacy is incredibly important to bodies. I'd say like over 99% of bodies require it. probably more. Some have just been overly traumatized and don't really require it. But um, if your body is looking for touch and you've been ignoring it, then start with self-touch and start with just like hand on the middle of your chest. So like your heart chakra, the energetic heart. You can put one hand there or two hands there and just hold, or one hand there and one hand on your belly. Connect with your body and just be present with it and be able to help your body calm down. Do some breath work. So one of my favorite breath works, I mean, I talk about different breath works like that. One of my favorite for anxiety is that intermittent one where you breathe in, hold, and then breathe out. But I also really like one where it just sounds like orgasmic on the breath out. And I'm going to give you guys a little hint of that. So like you just breathe in, you kind of breathe in through your nose, deeply to your toes, and then breath out, like a big sigh. Like just let it sigh out. Do it in your own way, do it on your own time. Let the sigh be deep, let the sigh reverberate through your body and like get you jazzed up too, because that reverberation can excite your body. If you do it um consistently for like a few minutes, your body can get pretty turned on. So we want to do a bunch of these things. We want to be able to connect with people. These are all things we desire in life, and a lack of intimacy, a lack of touch, a lack of physical intimacy, a lack of knowing ourselves can lead to a really huge imbalance. It can lead to not knowing who we are. It can lead to frustrations and burnout, complete dissatisfaction with our lives, numbness, just like feeling checked out and not caring. So especially in a world where so many of our connections are through things like video and internet and all these things where we're not actually touching another human being or connecting in person, it is so important to have physical intimacy to balance that out. Now more than, even 20 years ago, we weren't on our cell phones as much as we are now. It is, I think, like a huge, sending this out as a huge reminder. This is probably the time in history where we have had the least amount of human connection. I mean, COVID and the lockdown definitely created that too. So we've had a serious lack of connection, physical connection to other people, touch. And it is creating a lot of things like depression because those happy hormones are not kicking in. We don't have anybody to stimulate those in our body to give you the hug, to get the oxytocin going. If you don't have that going, you're going to start to feel down and you're going to start to probably feel depressed. It's not your fault. You just need to go and be able to flip that up. Find the people who will give you the hugs, be able to connect with others outside of technology. Technology is a gift, though, when you can't connect with people from far away, but it's also not our only solution. We need to actually get back to that human connection so that our bodies can regulate, so that we can know ourselves. We can have those experiences that like 30, 40 years ago were normal, like just going to hang out with friends and having those like dinner nights, and that kind of stuff brings balance in our lives. And I look at, so I'm 50 and I look at my generation, we don't do that very much, but my mother's generation, we had dinner parties all the time. We had guests all the time. We always had people over. We always had community. I always had community with my dad as well, different community, but both my parents created communities and we were part of them. And we just don't have that anymore. We need that. It's part of how we create intimacy. It's part of how we know each other. It's part of how we know ourselves, how we can be better in the world, how we can then, when we know ourselves, bring more of that with confidence to the world as well. We need more of all of that, guys. So one thing that you could do this week is go and just connect with a friend that you haven't seen in a really long time. See them in person. If they want to hug you, give each other a hug. Have a really good week and stay tuned in, turned on.
Thank you for choosing to listen to The Pleasure Zone with sex, relationship, and intimacy coach, Milica Jelenic. We'll return next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. We hope you'll join us. Until then, have the best week of your life by choosing to be turned on and tuned in to your body.